and they are actually like Irish Catholic families that came out to LA for the oil before Hollywood.
Yeah.
And if you scratch the surface of LA, we're still here, right? And we native Angelinos can sort of, one way that you can tell if someone's a native Angelino is they don't get stressed out about things. Whereas people who move to LA get very like particular about how to, no, you don't pronounce it that way and stuff like that. And if you're a native Angelino, you're like, yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, we were just having this conversation, I think 2 days ago or yesterday on the Instagram live, and David was asking me about like living in LA and, like if I don't get like almost stressed out when I leave, or I'm like, I just grew up with it. So it's just like another day in the park.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the people who, and I feel for them, people who feel that with what's going on with the crime and the wokeness and the taxes, and there's better opportunity in other states, and I'm all for that, and go where you need to raise your family. But we're here and we're staying here, and we're not, this is paradise, and it's a little bit broken right now, but why would we leave?
Well, and that's exactly how, so I'm from like the Chicagoland area. And so I'm from the suburbs, but my dad has worked in Chicago like my entire life. I've always been going to Chicago, and I love the city, and I love a lot of the people in the city. It's the government that runs it like crap. And I always get people on all of my YouTube videos and anything, even just people I talk to, they're like, well, why don't you just like leave? I want to branch out at some point, but it's my home. Like, what if somebody said that to you when you're from Texas? Imagine telling somebody from Texas, anybody, well, why don't you just leave? No, there's a lot of pride from where you come from, right?
It's your home. I lived abroad for 10 years, and I lived in Singapore for 6. I went to grad school in Singapore. It's amazing. Like it's you couldn't find a better run city, state, or whatever, city or country, both. And they really do a bang up job, and they're always coming together and saying, how can we make this more efficient and better and even more humane? And it doesn't always have like a reputation for being humane, but they really work at that, right? And so I lived there for many years, and I loved it, and it was great, but it wasn't home. Los Angeles is my home. It's my family's home. So, they're not going to kick me out. They're not going to run me out. They're not going to cancel me out. Like, we're staying, and that's it.
Yeah. It's like, I've been here before you and I'll be here after you.
Yeah.
One of those kind of things.
And you can't run away from your home. You can't run away from your home, especially, if it's broken right now and it not may be exactly how you want it to be. If you all run away, who's going to be there to fight all this stuff?
Absolutely. Oh, and imagine if we applied that same logic. What if we told somebody who's living in maybe a more conservative state or something like that, somebody who's happy at least with their local government? What if we said, oh man, you don't like Joe Biden? Why don't you just move to another country?
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
You're running out of places to run away from. That's the problem.
That's the one thing that I like about us conservatives. I've never seen conservatives say if Joe Biden is going to be the president, they never make that argument that I'm going to leave this country. It's always the people on the left. And it's like, all right, it shows your real values now for sure.
Well, there's a list of like 20 celebrities that are supposed to move out if Trump goes back in office. So we'll see how they stick to their guns, because they've said it publicly. So we'll see.
Oh, and they said it in 2020 and in 2016, and look at that, they're still here making the same statement. Big old.
They don't want to pay European tax rates.
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually a funny video I just saw today. There was a woke family in Australia that had this sign outside their house and said, "We acknowledge that this land belongs to," and whatever the tribe was, the Australian indigenous tribe. So they took a bunch of these people and they went to the house, and they were dressed in their tribe gear with the face paint, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I saw you had a sign out there that you said this is our land." "Yeah." "Okay, thank you. Can we come in? Like, we want to relax in your home." And the lady was like, "Oh, well, I didn't put the sign up, but I agree with it, but no, I'm cooking right now," and gave all these excuses. And there's like 15 people outside the door just basically calling her out and say, "Well, you said it's our land, but you won't let us in the house, so it must not be too woke."
What's really funny is like, if one of the things that's really been quite extraordinary over the last 20, 30 years is the Native, Indigenous American, however they want to identify, they've actually radically moved to the right. You'll see that Trump won a majority of the Native American vote, and they're just picking up on that. And because a lot of times, these Native Americans are seeing that the people who are supposedly representing them not only don't have their best interest in mind, but are just using them. And they actually resent that. And they're like, actually, what we want is not what you're telling people that we want. And we don't need like Kamala Harris to speak for us. We would actually like to just go ahead and vote for Trump and not have someone who, immigration is fine and great, but like that Kamala Harris would think that she could speak for hundreds of different tribal groups. When her father is from Jamaica, her mom's from India. That's great, but she can't speak for some tribe in West Virginia.
Yeah,
not at all. Not at all.
Yeah,
I mean, she can't really speak at all, for that matter. So first, we're gonna start with that. Baby steps, I guess, for her.
There's that one. I'm even thinking like when it comes to, so I've talked about it on our other breakaway stuff too. I just graduated college, like literally a month ago. And at my university, I was part of our student government. We had this thing called a land acknowledgement, in which we would do exactly what that sign said, where it would be, these are all the tribes that once inhabited our campus. And they would do that before every single meeting. And I made the argument one time at a meeting. I said, isn't that kind of insulting? Isn't that like looking at a Native American in the face and being like, ha, look at this, it's ours now, screw you. Like,
Did you go to a state school?
I did, Illinois State
Well,
University.
Yeah, so I mean, all the state schools are actually land grant universities. And where did the land grant universities come from? The government and the railroad companies took the lands from a lot of Native American tribes and created these. So all these professors, all these administrators, I'm the head of the Dean of Students Diversity Department, and I make $250,000 a year. That's all on the back of this land that was, so it's like, then why don't you give up that job and give that job to some person in a tribe? They won't do that.
It's all performative. That's all it is. They don't actually care at all about the land or any atrocity that might have been committed. None of the actual history. They don't care about any of it. It's performative. It's performative woke activism.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely. David Ragsdale, everyone. Welcome to the show. We've had an incredible conversation thus far, but I did want to give you an actual introduction. David Ragsdale is the CEO of Replatform. I actually have an amazing convention coming up March 8th to 10th in Las Vegas. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about yourself and about the convention coming up.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I've said, I'm very proud of this. I'm Native Angelino, lived abroad for a decade, did my master's in public policy in Singapore, came back, worked at Live Nation on the festivals team. And then during the medical emergency, I was part of a core group that was hired to create what became Defeat the Mandates. And while we were I'm being a little careful because I'm not sure where this is distributed. So don't worry, I'm not going to get you demonetized. So I know what words to use. I've been on YouTube, so I'm gonna be very, very respectful of, because people need to earn a living, and that was one of the things that Defeat the Mandates was all about. People needed their jobs, and we had a rally in DC at the Lincoln Memorial, in LA at City Hall. We had a litigation conference, which was very successful for lawyers last March in Atlanta. But while we were making this, we were debanked. We were kicked off a lot of B2B services that we used, that you need to use to produce these events. And so we were thrown into what some people call the parallel economy and other people call the freedom economy. To us, it's the same thing. It's just alternatives to sort of mainstream corporate goods and services that are now hyper ideological. And there's a high risk of being deplatformed, access denial, debanking, censorship, throttling, right? And so, but while we were in the parallel economy and having to be in there, right, we discovered a little bit of a quality problem. And this is the controversial part, right? That there was a lot of talk that got ahead of what the actual innovation was, right? And you'll not find, I think in the few minutes we've talked, I think there's no one more anti-woke than me, probably as anti-woke, but not anti-woke. But the innovation that we require to work around the dysfunction and incompetence of corporate America can't rely entirely on like anti-woke marketing, right? That can be an important tool. It can be something to identify. But it's not really, it doesn't make it intuitive for investors, for consumers, and for advertisers how to enter the parallel economy, why, and then how they can profit from it. And that's real important. So figuring all these things out, doing a bunch of deep dives, talking to a lot of innovators, people really hustling in a lot of different industries, from finance to healthcare to tech to media, obviously, even to farming. We came up with the concept of Replatform. And what we're doing over 3 days in Las Vegas is we're bringing together people from our previous coalition. So it's social conservatives, populists, libertarians, and even some classical liberals, or like red pill, like your Kennedy voters, right? Because they have a lot to offer too. And we don't always agree with each other on everything, right? But we all understand the current crisis, and that we may not end up in the same tribe when this thing shakes out, but right now we can make tools together. And so what we're doing is, I don't know if you guys know, like, I feel like I'm a little older than you guys. So like South by Southwest, but like 20 years ago, right? That's the vibe we're going for, where you have just this really eclectic mix of people, and they're just networking, they're learning from each other, they're sharing. Some guy has an idea, and there's a guy who has money to invest, and there's a programmer, and all three of them are like, hey, we can do this together. That's the type of joyful innovation we're going to spark at Replatform. So it's not a complaint-a-con, right? And I love TPUSA and what they're doing, but it's not that either, right? It's the best way to describe this would be like South by Southwest 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that. No, and I mean, I think it's incredible, and you're right in the fact that you said you can't base that entire economy off one thing, which is anti-wokeness, because as a regular corporate business person or a VC, when you come in, you need to have a perspective that's more than like we're anti-woke.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's great, that's a good marketing term, but like, what do I think about this? Like, give me some information. So, and I was talking with this about this to Gentry a while ago, and the parallel economy is brand new. So when anytime you have a new kind of frontier, there's going to be iterative companies that come around. Some are going to fail, but what I see is kind of that, like you were saying, everyone's trying to do it, but there's like a level of complexity that the regular, I guess you want to woke companies have figured out that I feel like a lot of parallel economies still have yet to figure out. So something like what you're doing is you're combining all these people and say, don't go do it yourself. Here's someone who does it very well. Go make something as good.
Yeah. And what we're also doing is we're really working with, frankly, there are a lot of conservatives or people who are in the various freedom movements who do have a lot of money, who do have investable funds, who are qualified investors, or who blah, 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 blah. And what they're finding is that they're getting so inundated with like pitches. And so they're like, if, and there's like a disconnect happening. And a lot of the people who even have like a great idea and have like the technical ability to build something and then even execute like an MVP into like the first 50 customers, which is the most important part. Like, will anyone use your product? You can have the best idea in the world and it can be beautiful, but if no one's going to use it, and then people use it, but will anyone pay for it? That's the next big step. So what we're offering investors is something that they've asked for. They want a conference like this where they can look at a lot of different offerings at once. They can look under the hood, kick the wheels, really get into something. So within our conference, we're having an accelerator. So we got a lot of people from the startup world, finance, venture, tech people, lawyers coming in and basically, whether you're a college student with a great idea or you're maybe someone in Tennessee who's actually has a company already, you can come to our accelerator and, potentially get investment, but at the very least, you're going to learn some things about maybe how to do things in a more tight way, right? And that's really the thing we need to do. We need to tighten up this freedom economy because it's a little flabby right now.
Yeah,
absolutely. And like, that's even one thing I've noticed. And I love that you're talking about quality as well as making it so it's more than just being anti-woke. I was at a conservative conference just a little over a month ago, and at it, there was a booth for anti-woke water. Was essentially what it was. I forgot exactly what it said, but I asked the guy, I was like, is like Aquafina, are they like super woke or something? Or was there something like he was like playing off the whole ultra right beer and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, is there a controversy I didn't know? And he was like, no, I just thought it'd be funny. And I'm like, look, we need to pick our battles here in a lot of this stuff. And if you're not actually fighting against something, if you're making it for a quick buck, then your anti-woke water is nothing more than a kind of a ploy for money rather than actually fighting against anything.
Yeah.
So
look, if you're a t-shirt, there's I know t-shirt guys who live in Brentwood, so you can make a nice buck selling t-shirts, right? And if you're quick and you can catch those trends and you can get them out, there's nothing wrong with that. So if you're a t-shirt guy and you're coming out with some great anti-woke slogan, that makes total sense. But like if you're trying to build like an alternative to Stripe, right? Like it's got to be a little bit more depth than F you Brandon, right?
Well, exactly. And we have to cultivate quality because otherwise it's not even a parallel economy. It's just it's the Walmart brand of everything that is woke.
Yeah. And investors don't like that. And even conservative investors, and people are like, oh, conservatives aren't investing. And that's not actually even true. What's happening is conservatives with money get hit up all the time, and they're just and it's not even that the underlying product they're being pitched is bad. There's often quality, but for whatever reason, someone maybe 5 years ago told everyone, if you're right of center and you have a great idea that needs funding, this is what you should put on slide 1 of your deck. And it's like, that's not what you need to do.
Yeah. No. I agree. It needs to be, like you said, it needs to be tightened up into a well-oiled machine, especially if you're going to compete with the big boys, especially if you scale. And then how do you fix logistics? That's a massive problem. You can have the best marketing in the world, but if you can't deliver your products, or how's your customer service? How's your UI? Are you iterating the website? What's the conversion rate? There's like all these things that like after you get past the initial, I have a great idea. It's like, okay, how do we implement it? That's the hard part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that we're really focusing on, because what we do and can develop better is better like networks of people. This is especially we're doing quite a lot of work, which some people might find boring, right? But we're doing quite a few panels and sessions and workshops on like hiring, employment practices, how to find the right talent, how to train talent, all that stuff, how to, because if sometimes again, we're lucky because in the Defeat the Mandates movement, we got so many people, quality people who had been fired because of the mandate. So we had like a pick of like the best, but that's not always true. And it's not always easy for someone to staff up. And so and that's really important, finding the right team, especially if you have limited funds and you have like a really like not a long runway, right? So picking the right team is important. And so that employment and HR stuff, while a little bit boring, that's critical for the parallel economy.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I noticed is in 2020, when all the conservatives kind of had a reawakening, if you'd say, and they all got deplatformed, not all, but a lot of them did, they kind of try to go to Rumble, or they left, let's say, Facebook and Twitter and whatever it is, and try to go to these other platforms. I think that's a big problem that they experience, is the quality of it, because Rumble back then, like 2020, it's much better now, don't get me wrong, but it's still not YouTube. And I'm glad there's people like you who are so worried about making sure that the quality is there for like user-friendly stuff, because I mean, us conservatives, we're lazy, we're average human beings, right? We want to have a nice platform. So I remember this like perfectly. I was like, I'm done with YouTube, done with YouTube. And I went to Rumble. This is 2020 November. And what did I experience? Like terrible, terrible quality, right? And it made me switch right back to YouTube. So I feel like a lot of people encounter that. And that's why I'm so glad that although there is this growing parallel economy, we're trying to make sure that it's actually good quality and the logistics are there and all this stuff. And you're right also that that's when these companies will get more funding and more revenue to get better and better. So
Yeah, to me, it reminds me of crypto in like 2017, where you had just everyone had an ICO, which was massive amounts of money available. Everyone was like, "This blockchain thing is going to revolutionize the world. It's going to be the antithesis to," and clearly the opportunity is there. But there were so many people that just didn't really know what they were doing, and a lot of people went under. So yeah, like David said, I think what you're doing is critical, because you're taking a different approach to it. You're taking all the hype and everything like that, but you're channeling into something that's a viable business opportunity for right now in the future. And it's funny that you mentioned this earlier about how you guys had the pick of the litter. And because I've been talking about this for the last few months, there's a lot of people who are really unhappy in their corporate jobs right now because of HR and things like that, that if they see an opportunity to join a parallel economy company, they're going to run. So I really do see a brain drain in the corporate environment to leave and go to, but like you said, they have to be the right opportunities, and the people have to know how to hire.
Yes, and they have to know how. I mean, so and this is a great example. So within the wokeness, right? Within the wokeness, there are some things that, while seemingly annoying, actually that corporate America has improved upon and done well, that we need to borrow from. And it's a little bit of discernment trying to pick from that. And like one of the thing is like this like concept of like onboarding, right? Like maybe like a traditional or a stereotypical concern, oh, what do you need from onboarding for? Like welcome aboard and sink or swim. Maybe, right? And maybe. But the reality is if we want to attract quality talent from the mainstream corporate world, they're gonna need to be, and it doesn't mean that everything's gonna look like it did at Goldman Sachs or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they're used to a certain like corporate best practices, it would probably behoove parallel economy companies to find out maybe some of those best practices aren't so bad, or actually aren't ideological. And I'm not talking about the DEI stuff or anything. I'm talking about like when someone new comes to your company, you just don't throw them into you actually say, you onboard them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to instill them with the knowledge of like the culture, and here's how things are going to work, and here's who you go to for this. So they're not sitting there like, okay, I know my job, but what do I do? Who do I go? Like, what's the chain? Like, of course, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, and this might be totally changing the subject a little bit, but when it comes to the parallel economy, a lot of what has scared people from even trying to enter that space, whether that's as an entrepreneur or an investor, is the level of power held by so many people that funnel money into the woke economy, such as, and the names that we're just now starting as a general public to get to know, like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, people like that. How much influence from your viewpoint do they really have, and do they have enough to stifle the parallel economy that we're trying to cultivate?
I think it's interesting. So I would have had a different answer a month ago, but clearly what we're seeing, if you saw some of the, Jamie Dimon at Davos, where he was basically like, well, I guess Trump was right after all. And of course he's just saying, but you have to, and I think that we live under a system that is increasingly dysfunctional, and it's lashing out and it's doing these crazy harmful things because it knows that we're in some last throes of something right? Maybe it's liberalism. I don't know. I don't know what it is, right? I can't identify it, but we all have that feeling.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily subscribe to the concept that it's like a group of people sitting in a room controlling things or making a plan. I think it's just like, some people call it a mindset or like a way of thinking, like maybe if you go back to Europe in the year like 1132, everyone would be thinking in a very type of Catholic way, right? And it's not that they all got together, but that's just the milieu.
Mhm.
And so, but there's definitely been a shift. And I begin to wonder if a lot of these awful corporate people, awful companies are actually so interested anymore in their type of repression. Obviously Trump sparked a fear in them and they went turbocharged. To me, they seem exhausted by it. And you just don't pick up that they have much appetite to do the things that they've been doing for several years, which is coming down hard on parallel economy companies, right? The joy that they got from that is gone, right? And it obviously gave them some level of joy by repressing us and canceling us and censoring us. So as a very long answer to your question, I would say that I think we have an opportunity here and I think we have a window. And I think that if we can build smart, like now and in the next 2-3 years, I think that we can build things where we don't have to worry about them anymore.
Yeah, when I saw that interview by Jamie Dimon, right?
Yeah.
Is his name. To me, it sounded like this is a guy who's clearly he's where he's at because he can see trends, he can see into the future to some extent. If you're looking at this onslaught, which in my opinion has just begun, this counter to the counter of this neo-Marxist revolution. To me, if I'm him, I'm like, yeah, this thing is not going to last. They've had 50 years to infiltrate the universities. In a year and a half, they're getting beat down. I better put myself in a position where I'm the good guy at the end of this because I want to secure myself.
Yeah.
So whether or not he's saying it out of his heart or out of his bank account, I don't know. But a buddy of mine, a very good buddy, he wrote his master's thesis on Larry Fink actually and BlackRock. And what he told me is he goes, the thing is, Larry Fink looked at the economy and he was trying to figure out how can I make the most amount of money out of this, and everything was just taken up. Everything was already almost like monopolized. And he was like, according to my buddy, he was saying he was looking at the landscape and he's saying, how can I create this massive behemoth that no one's ever done? And he saw ESG as an opportunity to do that. And now, whether or not he really cares about ESG, who knows? But all I know is he's created the largest bank that's ever existed that we know of. So, there's that.
Absolutely. And even kind of building off from that, as well as my previous question too. So we talked about how much of an influence State Street, Vanguard, stuff like that might have had, and how much they might have in the future. How much influence does the average person have? I mean, we look at things like the Bud Light boycott, which I would consider to be the most successful conservative boycott in the history of America, at least, if not the world. And then we even look at some smaller ones like Target, which was fairly successful, still kind of ongoing. CMT, the Country Music Television, after the Jason Aldean stuff. And there has been a rise in even just your average person that preaches some level of a conservative or populist agenda, like your Oliver Anthony blowing up, singing Rich Men North of Richmond. So I guess I kind of answered part of that question, but from your perspective, how much power does the average person have?
Probably, to answer your question honestly, it probably, probably in the family unit, it's probably the wife and mother, right? So that, and we know this from, a long time of studying advertising and household economics, right? So it's really important, right, that if you can, in terms of families, who the decision maker is, it's usually the wife and mother, the woman of the household. And so the husband, the father, and the kids will usually go along with that. So in terms of like the average person, I think it's more helpful in terms of for the parallel economy to think of like family units, right? Because if we can, as parallel economy entrepreneurs, focus our like marketing, our research, our everything into like what choices and how a family unit, which is oftentimes determined by the wife mother, how she's making her moves throughout the day and what trade-offs she has, and really like studying that in a way that, like, for example, efficiency experts in like the 1905 would do, right? If we can go back to something like that, where we go to, these conservative moms, right? And we actually look at their day of work, of activism, of raising a family, of faith, of schooling, whether it's homeschooling, charter, private, or even public, right? And we can really understand where her pain points are in consumption, and all these things. I think that becomes the person that we should focus on. Now, not everyone's married, not everyone has a family, right? So then it becomes a much more expensive endeavor, right? And so I answered your question sort of in the reverse because I'm
Yeah.
looking at it from like a company's perspective.
Mhm.
And so it would probably be cheaper and more effective for companies in the parallel economy to to look at family units, and then specifically the wife and mother, and then and just understand her, get her feedback, and almost like shadow her for a bit to see how she, jukes during the day. And I really think that is probably the best route right now, because otherwise, we just don't have the capital to do like really extensive research into like all these different types of individuals. So I would start with families.
Yeah, and not remind me, but it points out to the fact that and I think we've all seen these charts where there's a bifurcation of men and women, where the men are becoming extremely more conservative and the females are becoming extremely more liberal. So I'm wondering, as you're saying that, what kind of impact that will have
Not
on.
married. So that, if you go a little bit deeper into that, that's a function of more women being unmarried or getting married later. The political bifurcation doesn't work exactly like that when you account for married women, and especially married women with children, right? Those are the women who make up the bulk of conservatism. And then also, like, and to be realistic, if you look at any type of right of center or freedom oriented movement, you're going to have the meat and potatoes of that group are mothers, right? And that's just, whether it's the pro-life movement, whether it's even the pro-gun movement, whether it's Moms for Liberty or James Lindsay, right? Whether it's Robert Kennedy, the bulk of his supporters are moms, right? They're the ones that Robert Kennedy's foundation is built on a group of moms who 15 years ago, when he was talking about the environment, this and clean water, that, stalked him and said, Mr. Kennedy, we need you to take a look at these vaccines. They've harmed my kids. And enough moms did that enough times to him that he stopped. And he said, I got to look into this, right? And if you look at, and that's not even necessarily conservative, but that's, so I see that on Twitter. I see, though, women are going left, men are going right, but not moms, not married women who have children. They're the foundation of this all.
And they're not even necessarily, they're going conservative in the fact of a lot of the beliefs that they have are conservative, but it's not based on any kind of tribalistic instinct to go towards a political ideology or pick a side. It's a natural instinct to protect their kids.
Yeah.
Much more so. Very interesting.
Yeah, especially with the products they buy. Like, for instance, Seek Smith, founder of the Mom Army, a good friend of mine, she just, there's a Target across the street from where she lives, and she refuses to go there now. So in my head, I'm like, wow, all that. And she has a big influence on a lot of people around the country who are clearly also moms, because she founded the Mom Army. But that's a massive chunk of money that Target is not getting now.
Yeah.
And that's a massive opportunity for a parallel economy that could provide the same goods and services. So yeah, I mean, there's just a massive, and because typically the dad's out working and doing stuff, and the mom is the one that's saying, no, this food is not good for my kid. This one's better. Let me research this. What's good? So it's incredible.
And like that even kind of leads me into looking at you, David, as kind of like a catalyst for the parallel economy. And I don't know if that's lowering what you see yourself as, or being hyperbolic in it, but I really do. I mean, you seem to be taking a lot of initiative in it. But in questioning the motive of the parallel economy, obviously there is the general idea of to combat the wokeness that seems to be happening in a lot of stuff. But with the overall goal, and I could be even creating a false dichotomy here, so tell me if there's another option, but would the goal of the parallel economy be to overtake the woke economy, or to push the woke economy to meet the needs of everyone?
I don't know. I think that might be different depending. I think some people will come into the parallel economy right now because they don't like a current tool or a product, or they've been denied access. So really right now, most people who come into the parallel economy, aside from like the direct to consumer, like t-shirts or Jeremy's razors, Jeremy's chocolates, all those things, right? That's like a surface level, right? It's not important, it makes a lot of money, it's great.
Yeah.
But then the real root of like the parallel economy, right? People come into it right now just because they have to, right? And so whether or not it's a replacement thing or it's a nudge thing, it's almost like right now, that's not even the point. The point is, how do we, with this group of people, with this access to capital, how do we build things that will attract people who don't have to come into who weren't forced into the parallel economy, but by their own choice say like, that's actually better than what we have here. That's it.
To me, thinking more technically about this, like you said, your surface level products that are just fulfilled, for consumer, but then you have the deeper stuff, like as you said, the Stripe, like rebuilding a Stripe. To me, if I was a tech guy and I would, and I was in one of these massive companies where I'm just a number, And I saw the opportunity to go do what I do in a parallel economy, but really have more of a fast track to get to the people, the decision makers, and to really implement my ideas instead of running it up 15 levels of hierarchy to even get a meeting with the person that's a decision maker. As a technologist, I would probably want something like that because it helps your ideas get there quicker. And since they've already proved viability, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can white label, and there's open source things, and there's AI now. To me, I would say, well, yeah, I'll go work here because I mean, I can get stuff done, and I can do it better than this massive company can do it. And I think that might be one of the driving forces behind getting people to come over and say, hey, come do it over here. It's the Wild West, in a sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. What we've seen is that big tech, at least, it's sclerotic. It's not really I mean, Google is impossible to use, right? And so they have are these huge the innovation funnel in America is fundamentally broken, and all we're getting are like hookup apps and another food delivery service, right? And so like if you think that like innovation comes out of like necessity and this isn't popular to say, a little bit of desperation. A little bit of desperation is actually a good thing, I think. And so you look at the groups who have been totally excluded, like your social conservatives, populists, not too much libertarians, but some libertarians, but not too much. They've been part of the mainstream innovation narrative for a while. But like I actually think like some really cool innovation is going to come from a lot of social conservatives, right?
Yeah.
And you, whether or not you're a social conservative or not, that's besides the point. The point is they were essentially kicked out of like corporate tech and have been for well over a decade. They've been forced out of it. So what happened? That's the whole story of this country, right? The Pilgrims were forced out of England for their religious beliefs. What did? They founded America. Similar things could happen with tech.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm even wondering. So, what do you think happened? Like back when I asked that very broad question, like in terms of the business marketplace, we look back before my time, like 30, 40-ish years ago, even around my early childhood, like 20-ish years ago, it was you use like the 4 P's of marketing. That used to be what product, place, price, promotion. That used to be what people would use to decide whether or not they would get a product. They would get a Bic razor because it was cheap, it was effective, because it was at the store they were going to, things like that. Nowadays, I call it the 5th P of marketing, performance. That's what everybody seems to care about, especially among my generation. Are you carbon neutral? Are you made out of 100% reusable plastics or recyclable plastics? Do you support, or does my chocolate bar support gender queer theory in developing nations? Like crap like that. Why is it? And how did we get to this point to where the product itself and the quality of it matters less almost than the performance of a company?
I mean, you could possibly say like that, when everything is made in China or in Bangladesh, then you can't really differentiate on quality, and you have to, and you have to create like a brand, and you have to create a brand that has some type of like message, and it's just on like branding, right? So like it's the old story, like like Polo. Why would we've known for a long time that people will pay outrageously more for the same quality colored shirt. One has a Polo player and one doesn't, and people will just associate that with quality. So all these companies did is they said, hey, if we insert a certain socio-political branding, we can't, that's actually very cheap. It's really cheap. It's like a way for us to do this lift real cheaply.
Yeah. And also I think to add on to that, the oversaturation of the market with the same products. I mean, how do you stand out in a marketplace where there's a million people like you? You gotta have a story, because you're probably all getting like, as you said, everyone's getting their stuff in the same place.
Same factory.
So how do I just slap a new face on it and say it's something different? Also, I don't know who I can attribute this to, but it was some older guy who's been in tech for a long time, and he's basically saying, if you looked at the world in the 1980s and you look in the world now, you wouldn't really know that we advanced all that much unless you looked at anything with technology like cars and cell phones, really.
Yeah, we're stuck. Stuck, he calls it. I know who you're talking about. He's I forgot who he is. He's on Twitter. And he says we're stuck. And it's true.
Yes.
Like I'm a Gen Xer, right? And I was actually driving through LA and I saw kids from a high school walking out. And I'm like, you know what? They don't look that different than like, they're not like their jeans and everything. Now I went to Catholic school, so we didn't, but like, I'm like, I like, if you go in the 80s and you were say 40 years before 1940s, you'd be like, whoa, like everything is different. But if you actually go from the 80s to that, the one big difference is that everyone's like this. But other than that, we haven't really advanced in much of anything.
No. And I would even say that we've lost a lot of the talent that we had. So for instance, I love the Apollo missions back in, in the 60s and NASA. The stuff they used to make without computers is just incredible. The craftsmanship, like we can't even make that. We can't replicate anymore. They've lost the ability. The people have died. And it's like we lost this massive amount of capability to make stuff because we're just relying on automated computers making them somewhere in China.
Yeah.
100%. And I mean, even with that, like I think about, have you guys ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what I see at a very slow level. If anything, I think that movie happened where it was like 500 years in the future. We're probably moving faster than that. But as it's happening right now, we see people. I mean, when you have addictions to things like pornography, and that is widespread. We have the cultural acceptance of promiscuity, not only of the heterosexual nature, but also of wild amounts of different sexualities nowadays. And more and more and more, we just have the dumbing down of society. And since the 1980s, while also not really changing much else. And then along with that, we also we have a when it comes to creativity that we're talking about and how nothing is really new. Well, we have a dumbing down of our architecture and the things that we're making. And Tucker Carlson talks about this, and I love it. And it's almost in a way to keep us dumbed down, in a way to almost control us. I mean, no sane person, this is almost directly from Tucker. I mean, no sane person would sit in a small square room with fluorescent lighting and no windows. Like that is meant to keep you like sad and depressed and unhappy. It is not meant to in any way instill joy or creativity or mentally stimulate you or promote any kind of growth. We have the reason. I believe a lot of this is intentional. That's just my personal belief. It's not out of laziness or anything like that. I think some of it or much of it is intentional to keep us in some level of control of our corporate and governmental overlords.
So I studied classics as an undergrad, and one of the reasons like I'm not a liberal or leftist is I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, but I don't believe in progressive history, right? I think we go through cycles. And to me, right, it appears that we're in a point in a cycle. And this isn't like doomer pill or black pill or anything like that. But this is also a reason why we really do now need to build up the parallel economy for what's coming. And I don't mean like Armageddon or nuclear war, stuff like that. But I think we're coming into a winter. And I think that we're the children of winter. And children of winter cannot be the children of spring. And so like in a way that gives me heart and hope, because we're in this crazy time and things don't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense that illegal aliens can attack police officers in New York and then get out of jail right away without being deported, without being right. None of that makes sense.
And show no remorse.
Yeah, no remorse. Like I don't care if you're left, right. No communist is in favor of that, really. Like you can go to a communist country, you can go to any society except for where we are right now. For some reason, our elites are just, it doesn't even make sense to them. But we are the children of winter, and we are in the winter, and we have to build like we are. And that's just my belief that we're in a cycle, in a period in our cycle, and that there's a woulda, coulda, shoulda, who knows, but that's where we are. And we're called to be in the time we're in, and we're called to build for our children, our grandchildren, their children. And we may plant a tree whose shade we won't experience. And that is it sounds beautiful, but it's a really tough concept to accept, right? Yeah. Because we are not raised like that in America. We are not we have not been trained in our modern post-war America to plant a tree that our grandchildren will enjoy the shade of. We have been so trained that because of modernity and progress and everything, that we can get it now, and it needs to be for us. And sadly, I don't know that that's the time for us.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right, because so for instance, my grandmother, she fled communist Cuba, and she would like just give her life for any one of her grandkids or her sons like this without a second thought. Just give everything she has, everything. And you don't find people like that anymore. So when you have people like that, you're like, wow, like, that's something that we've lost as a society. And maybe it was because she grew up in communist Cuba. So she sees what happens when you have these type of, people take over and the misery that it causes. And she, I talked to her the other day, and she says, what the heck is going on? So I left Cuba, I came here. Now it's becoming like Cuba. I said, yeah, well, we're fighting, Grandma. You gotta give me 20 more years.
Viva Cuba Libre, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm really excited to go March 8th to 10th in Las Vegas. It's at the Horseshoe. Is that right?
Yeah, the Horseshoe. And people can check it out at replatformvegas.com.
Yeah, I'll definitely be putting some links out on my socials, which is incredible. And does Replatform have a social media?
We do. Gosh, now I'm embarrassed. You can go to replatformvegas.com and check it out. Yeah. So sorry, it's hard. I'm not like a master of all things, and social media, I'll be honest, is not something that I'm particularly great at.
And you probably shouldn't be if you're focused on all these other things, which is good. Thankfully for us, you're not a master of social media, because
not at all.
You wouldn't be doing everything else you're doing. We'll handle that aspect. You handle
that. You guys take care of it. And I'll put it on. There'll be plenty of toilet paper, not long lines. And we'll have the coffee will be hot. And
there you go.
That's all we're doing.
That's amazing.
Well, I really appreciate you answering all of the different questions I have. I love talking about the economy, parallel economy, everything like that. And I'm going to try my best to work with my day job so I can be at the Replatform.
Yeah, we'd love to have you guys out. It'll be a great time. Very joyful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David Ragsdale, CEO of Replatform Vegas, March 8th to 10th at the Horseshoe in Las Vegas. We will be there. He will be there. So come get edified. And if you like what he was saying, come meet some people. And if you're tired of living and working in that corporate world where HR is on your back because you do anything nowadays, come figure out what other people are doing. And you might have a breath of fresh air and you might find someone you might do business with. You never know. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on, David. Appreciate your time.
That was awesome. Thank you.